So it's been a while, but here we are to talk about something that is not murder, but just as heavy: racism. Hello everybody, welcome back to Meddling in Antiquity. My name's Teray, and today we're going to be talking about E.L. Doctorow's, then Terrence McNally's, Ragtime, the musical. Now, before we get directly into talking about the show, I do want to warn that there will be discussion of really heavy topics, such as issues dealing with immigration, and more importantly, racism, because that at the center of the show is really what it's about. So if that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to skip to the end, because I do have a couple announcements for watchers of the channel just to explain a bit of what's been going on with me, and to let you know that there are other things that are happening that you can check out. So, with all of that said, let's get into the story. Now, everyone who knows me knows that I'm kind of obsessed with Ragtime. I've been in the show twice, the first time as an ensemble member, 4 years later as one of the lead roles, Sarah. Now, it's a show that sticks with me the story itself is one that, as a person of color, is really important, because it is an important story that at its center is about people of color. However, there are some things that I do take issue with in regards to the musical and the novel as well. Being written by a white man, the novel, a musical created by 3 white men, the stage show, and the violence against people of color, specifically police violence. Now, you may say, wait, when does this show take place? Why is it so relevant? No, well, if you know anything about music history, you'll know that the title, Ragtime, is very indicative of the time period. Now, the show, if you read the timeline of the show, is interesting. There's periods that they discuss that are from 1902 to 1906, but the meat of the story begins in 1908 and goes until the sinking of the Lusitania at the beginning of World War I. And the time period is very indicative of what the subject matter is. The show contains a lot of racial slurs, which is very indicative of the time, but they are used by white characters to demean the people of color, specifically the Black people. There are also anti-Semitic slurs used in the show against another character, not a character of color, but a character who is Jewish, who is fleeing Eastern Europe during World War I, to kind of avoid everything that started brewing in that area at that time. Now, Ragtime at its root is interesting because we have these characters from different socioeconomic classes and different racial groups and different ethnic backgrounds all coming together and all interacting at the center of the story that's kind of circling through all of these important moments in history, because we do have several historical characters on top of our main ensemble cast. So our main ensemble cast is a wealthy white family, a middle lower class Black family, and a poor immigrant Jewish man and his daughter. So those are our fictional characters that we see interacting through the show, but then within that we see them weaving and interacting with historical characters like vaudeville performer Evelyn Nesbit, Harry Houdini, J.P. Morgan, Henry Ford, Booker T. Washington, and most importantly, one of my favorite characters, Emma Goldman. Now, these historical characters play major parts because we see our fictional characters being injected into these moments where these historical characters are having these massive, revolutionary things that are happening. Specifically, the character Tate, the poor Jewish man, in his interactions with Emma Goldman. And Cole House, our lead Black character, interacting with Booker T. Washington. And the story, however good it is, still does have some of the essential problems in regards to garnering sympathy by killing off your characters of color. And I'll get into that in our next section. But as a brief overview of the story, it is these three groups of these fictional characters interacting with each other, and then also these historical characters on the fringes. Now, I love Ragtime. I adore the show, and I think that there is a good message behind it. However, it's conveyed in a way that is not really conducive to what audiences of color want to see. So let's get into that real quick. So Ragtime, interestingly enough, regardless of how much good I think the show is capable of, it is a show based on a book written by a white man, a show written by three white men, where the two lead black characters, Coalhouse and Sarah, die. Now, the first time I was in the show as an ensemble member, as I mentioned. The second time I was in the show, I played Sarah. And this section is going to be full of some spoilers, so if you do not feel like you want to spoil the show for yourself, I would recommend skipping past this bit towards the end. However, Sarah is beat to death by police in the end of Act 1 because they think she has a gun and that she's going to attempt to shoot the vice presidential candidate at the time. She is beat to death by police, leaving behind her son and an extremely traumatized Coalhouse. And they use that to garner sympathy, but it also turns Coalhouse into the main antagonist of the second half of the show. Understandably, because this is the woman that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, the mother of his child, and now she's been beat to death for no reason. However, they use that and they turn Coalhouse into the villain of the second act. However understandable his motives are, he is the second act's villain, and I think that was not the correct approach, because Coalhouse's struggle comes from the fact that he is a black man. Coalhouse is a wealthier black man. He was able to afford a car. That car is destroyed by a group of racist Irish volunteer firemen. Because yes, regardless of how poor the Irish were at that time, they still were racist to black people because the upper classes made them feel like that. So, prejudice toward Irish people and racism towards black people are not things that are mutually exclusive, because the upper class hated poor people, but they hated poor white people far less than they hated middle class black people. So they did that on purpose. So if you're one of those people who's like, oh, but the Irish were slaves too, shut up, because you're wrong. And you're stupid, probably, because you didn't take the time to literally do a Google search. Anyway, Coalhouse, in the events leading up to Sarah's death, takes every legal avenue available to him to try and get justice for himself and for his vehicle. Nobody will take his case. This leads Sarah to write a letter to the vice presidential candidate asking him for help. When she goes to deliver that letter, they say she has a gun and they beat her to death. Then Coalhouse becomes Act 2's villain because he took every legal avenue possible, and when he realized that legality wasn't going to get him anywhere, he starts blowing up volunteer firehouses, which anarchy, but it makes him the villain of Act 2. And that's a massive misstep, because regardless of how realistic that approach is, it still takes this man who was victimized not only by racism, but also by the legal system, because nobody would do anything to help him. So it's taking this man who is victimized by two different parts of this oppressive system and turns him into the bad guy for taking matters into his own hands. And then unfortunately at the end of the show, right before the epilogue of the entire show, Coalhouse is shot to death by police. because you can't round out a show about racism unless you kill your two black main characters, right? Yeah. So regardless of how much I love Ragtime, I love the music, the show itself has some major issues that I don't think are addressed enough. And considering it's a story told by the book was written by a white man, the stage play is written by white men, and it victimizes black and brown bodies like that, is traumatizing for people of color. And I mean, as much as I love the show, thinking about it, and as much as I love the community that I built with my cast, the first and second time around I did it, but the second time specifically, it is a difficult show for me to talk about because of how much trauma they put into this one black female lead character. And if you want an idea of that, I would highly recommend going and listening to Your Daddy's Son from the show, because it does outline essentially Sarah's trauma that she dealt with. But it's a good show. I appreciate Ragtime for what it is, but I feel like appreciating it for what it is not an excuse to ignore all of the things that are wrong with the show as a whole, which is a narrative written and controlled by white people, where the white people are eventually the saviors, because the rich white lady mother adopts Sarah and Colehouse's child and raises that child as her own. And that kind of throws in a sprinkle of white saviorism right at the end of the show. But theater as a whole now needs to examine shows that involve people of color, like Ragtime, like Hairspray, and really think about how those stories and how those narratives that are written and controlled by white people, does it have a white savior narrative? And if it does it actually need it? Because if it doesn't, get rid of it, because we're tired of it. People of color are tired of seeing white people in charge of saving the lives of black and brown folks, because that's not realistic. Black and brown folks have always had to advocate and save ourselves. It's nice to have help from allies, but it's not up to those allies to jump in and be the person who saves the day, because it's not their day to save at the end of the day. So that wraps us up. And I think I've included a bit of final thoughts into this as well. So I'm going to get into my announcements and a couple of the changes that are going to be happening on the channel. So this is my first video back after a 2-week break. Now, the first week of that was just for like a mental health thing, because I needed a break from constantly editing, uploading, etc. The second week of that was me getting a new computer and figuring out how that's going to work. Now, to get into the changes I'm going to be making on this channel, I am starting up school again next Monday. So the day this goes up, a week after, I will be starting school again for the first time in a year. So I'm going to be devoting my entire attention to that, because my education is extremely important to me. Now, on top of that, because I will be in school full time and also working not really working, but also doing this and doing a couple other things, I'm not going to be able to upload Monday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday. I'm going to have to start spreading those out a bit. So I'm going to start making changes. So Monday, you'll see this market music. Saturday, you'll see serial scrutiny like normal. But then it'll be another week. You'll get your formative fashions video. And then that following Sunday, you will get socio-political smackdown. And then that is how the schedule is going to go so far, because mentally, the upload schedule I have is one that I cannot maintain while also in school full time and doing the other things that I'm also working on. Now that I've gone through the uploading changes, let's talk about the other cool things that I've been working on. So, the first thing I want to talk about is you may see this setup right here behind me with my mic and my headphones. Now, that's kind of a dual purpose thing. So the first thing I use it for is I am now officially the co-host of a podcast. It is called the Let Me Explain podcast. I will link it in the description box below. It is a podcast that I am now co-hosting with a dear friend of mine, Emily, where we watch a thing and we come up with the most ridiculous out-of-pocket theories we can, and then we talk about them and record it for your listening pleasure. Now, it's a very fun podcast, and I very much enjoy doing it. And while you don't have any videos from me to listen to, you can 100% listen to the podcast. Because as I'm recording this video, we are also getting ready to record our next episode of the podcast, episode 4, my second episode with the show. The second thing that that's for is my music. Now, people who know me, who watch these videos, know that I am a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter, and I just released my first single about a week or two ago called Myth, which you can stream on Spotify, it's on Bandcamp, and it is also available to purchase on iTunes. You can stream it on Apple Music. But that is also a thing that I have done. And I'm continuing to do that. I'm working on an EP right now of songs based off of pop culture things that I really enjoy. So if that's something that catches your fancy, I would recommend going and following me on Spotify at Terry McQueen, which is the name that I always have it. I will also link that in the description below. And check out my music because there is more coming soon, I promise. So those are kind of the things that are happening in my life right now. So I will be making a community post about the changes in the upload schedule just because I need to slow it down for my own health and for the sake of my academics. And if anything else has to change in regards to the upload schedule, that is something I will do. Like I might start alternating every other upload with formative fashion, so you might not get things normally. But if that changes, I will update in community posts and I will post about it on all my social medias. And those are all should be in the description of the channel. So that about wraps us up for this episode of Market Music, and I will see you all on Saturday for Serial Scrutiny. Bye.